It's Friday! What up, 24-hour party people? Welcome to Branding for Breweries, the show, as the intro says, that brings the brightest minds from around the beer world to your earballs and eyeballs to help your brewery thrive and do incredible things. And a massive shout out before we talk about today's guest to Charles Faram, the show sponsor with the mostest. These guys have told me that they have been working on some phenomenal stuff for your low-no beers recently. Not just hops, but a lot of other bits and bobs going on. So if you want to find out more, drop them a message on the website, grab their email, find them on LinkedIn, and they'd be more than happy to help because they're going to help you develop something which is absolutely superb. And now on to the show. Today we're talking about one of my many passions, which is of course marketing and beer releases, but not just standard marketing, proper marketing, make a big impact, turn heads, make beers fly off shelves. And I've invited the delightful, the enigmatic, the glorious Scott Browne from Tiny Rebel to come and chat to me today. Because Scott comes from a slightly different background and now is making huge waves in Tiny Rebel. So that's enough of me yabbering on. Let's get Scott into the chat and let's take it away. Scott, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm very well. How are you?
I am super funky fresh because it's Friday when we're chatting today and I can see the weekend rapidly approaching. So that's grand. But you've got a busy afternoon as well, haven't you?
As always, yeah.
So, Scott, thank you so much for joining me today, buddy. To help the listeners who may not be familiar with yourself or indeed the Tiny Rebel brand, would you care to give us a bit of an introduction before we get stuck into today's chinwag?
Yeah, so I'm Scott. I'm the head of marketing at Tiny Rebel. So Tiny Rebel is the largest independent craft brewery in Wales. They've been going for around 15 years. I've actually only been with the business just over 7 months now, so I definitely can't take credit for the previous 14 years. But like I say, we've done a lot of cool things since I've joined, and I personally was in the spirits industry before this, so a lot of alcohol marketing experience. But yeah, slight different industry now. But yeah, hopefully can impart some knowledge today.
That's what it's all about, mate. So, Scott, like you rightly said, you came to Tiny Rebel from outside of beer. What did you immediately notice when you got into the brewery world that was different from other industries?
Like I said, I definitely came from outside the beer world from a career point of view, but I feel like I've probably been in the beer world in terms of drinking it for a lot longer. But I think from working in it, I think one of the first things that shocked me was the speed in which you could just release new products. So with spirits, I was with AU Vodka for 5 years before I joined Tiny Rebel, and we had a bit of a strategy where we would launch only 2 flavors a year, a summer flavor and a winter flavor, and each one of those flavors would be locked in kind of like 6 to 8 months before. So you were playing a bit of a guessing game of like what flavor might go down well next year. It was down to like materials and all the sampling and everything. Whereas when I came into beer, everything was done in-house. And I think with cans and everything, things can be turned around a lot quicker. So that was quite interesting, where it was a lot more reactive in terms of, you could have an idea or something could happen in the world that will spark an idea, and then you can make a new beer and we could actually release that next month. So I went from releasing 2 products a year to releasing maybe like 1 a month. So that was really cool. Something I found quite interesting. And then I think the design, especially in craft, is something that was quite mad. Because I think a lot of brands are really strict with their brand guidelines and everything. Whereas like if you look at Coke or Pepsi, if they were to release like a new flavor, and I think there's a tropical Pepsi is out now, but if you look at all these cans, it's kind of 90% of the can is still the Pepsi or the Coke brand. And then maybe 10% of the can is this new flavor, cherry or tropical, whatever it is, where craft is interesting. I don't think there's many other industries like it, where you could have 3 cans in your hand from the same brewery and they look completely different. Whereas it's almost like 90% of the can is some crazy illustrated design and maybe 10% of the can is the brewery's name. There's a lot more like creative freedom. So I have a bit of a design illustration background, so that was really exciting. The creative freedom you have with these like new beers you can bring out. So yeah, those are the 2 big things I noticed when entering the old beer world.
Yeah, and obviously you've come into a pretty important marketing position.
Yeah.
What I tend to find is when I chat to a lot of breweries and we talk about marketing, like a lot of breweries will go, yeah, marketing, we're on social media, we do marketing. But in your opinion, what does marketing for a brewery mean and encompass?
Social media is definitely a big part of it. I think, it used to be something was a nice to have, was a social media presence, whereas I think it's an absolute necessity now. But I think it's more about connecting with your audience. It's like how you get your brand message out there is I think the main thing, the main part marketing plays for a brewery is getting that message out there of what your brand stands for, what it means. And then, you can then use those social platforms as a tool to build a community, and then you can connect with the community and grow. And yeah, I think it's the feeling that your brand creates rather than, I can't think of the word, but yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course. And so I suppose if you take like a common activity is going to be beer launches, like you say, even at Tiny Rebel, what you've discovered, there's so many that keep on coming out. But why do you think breweries struggle to make that kind of impact with a launch when you've seen it being done so very well in the past?
I think maybe just not putting focus in the right areas. I think you could make a great beer that tastes amazing, but then if you don't have a real strategy to launch it, you're just not giving it the best platform for success. I think it's almost like jumping the gun. Like you could just drop a beer now. I think I see a lot of like breweries doing it where they'll say new beer out now, and it's that's the first time I've ever seen it, and it's available now. You can go on their website. Whereas in marketing, it's called the rule of 7, where a customer usually has to see something around 7 times before they'll resonate with it, before they'll consider buying it. So I think not doing that is something that a lot of breweries are leaving on the table, is before they release a beer, kind of, letting people know something's coming, informing what the new brand is, why they've created it, why it's different to other things on the market. Just so by the time that actual launch day comes, you're pretty familiar with it. You know what it is. You're kind of in the queue waiting to buy it. Yeah, I'd say that is definitely something a lot of breweries could benefit from, is just a proper launch strategy.
So let's break that down a bit. Say a brewery has a beer coming out in 4 weeks' time.
Yeah.
What do you do in the 4-week lead up that generates as much kind of like interest and hype before a can or a pint is available to buy?
I think before, if you're giving yourself about 4 weeks, I think you're going to want to have it decided first. Does the brand have a strong design? Does it have a good theme? What is the message behind it? You're going to want to know all the answers to these questions before you start. And then I would just get a calendar. I personally use a massive whiteboard that everyone in the office hates because I seem to block every window with it. And it's like, it's this big annoying whiteboard. But, you map out those 28 days. And obviously your launch day, that's when you post your launch photo, and it's got the call to action. It's available now. But then, that's 1 day out of 28. So then you fill in the gaps. Then it's like, at what point am I going to say why we're releasing this beer? At what point are you going to say what hops are in it? At what point are you going to post, the design and like the time that went into the design? Are you going to make some funny videos with the brewery team? Are you going to get in the brewery and take some like real like process shots of it being made? And all of a sudden you'll start to like fill in the gaps, and then you'll see, okay, well, we posted those. Well, there's 3 or 4 days empty there. What can we fill in there? And I think as long as like everything you're putting in is just build into this one launch, by the time it does launch, everyone is then aware of the message you're going for, and it's giving itself its best chance then to launch properly and become a successful brand.
And so are you saying like they really need to be drip feeding like every day on the lead up to it? Is that the best approach?
Not every day, but like I said, if you just try and stick to the rule of 7, where before you launch something, your audience is seeing it 7 times, and that can be done through social media. There's obviously so many different like levels of marketing. You can get out in the street, you can actually show people, you can run paid ads, you can tease it. I think there's a lot of ways you can just slowly tell your audience about this beer before you launch it.
Well, I suppose like a really good example is you guys collaborated with the donut brand Hookah, and that kicked off. In your mind, what made that work so well beyond just having like a decent beer?
Yeah, that was a really fun one, to be fair. The guys at Hookah are great. So Hookah, for anyone who doesn't know, they're a donut company based in South Wales, the same as us. And they do some crazy donuts that are like this big. Their best seller is called the Homer, obviously inspired by the Simpsons, and it's a big neon pink frosted donut. And it's one of those, like, working with other brands and collaborating is great anyway, but I think it just works really well when there's a lot of synergy between the brands and it just kind of makes sense. So it wasn't completely crazy for us to make a donut beer, because over the years we've always done some pretty interesting flavored beers. We had Pump Up Jam, which is like one of our really popular launches anyway. So actually creating the liquid wasn't so crazy, but I think looking at what linked the two brands together, like really like a brewery and a donut brand shouldn't have that much in common. But I think the way that we have both marketed ourselves over time, I think there's a lot of like links there where both brands are quite skatery, quite grungy. I guess you could say the audience is kind of like adult emos, which is something that definitely, like, yeah, there's a lot of synergy there. And then with the can design, we kind of like let the Who Cult guys run with it, because they've got such a strong brand. Like, they really just use the two colors, like black and pink. So the can was like a checkerboard, very emo-y inspired can, had like a black lid. And then we just leaned into that theme for the whole launch then. Everything was quite like grungy, skatery. We did a giveaway where we made a custom skateboard. There's a lot of checkerboard vans in the content. Just something that we knew would resonate with both of our audiences when we were doing these collaborations. And then, what else was there? There was, I think, just the donuts in general as well, because like I said, they are this neon pink frosting. We had the guys down to the brewery, and it was just that weird juxtaposition of like neon pink donuts in a very industrial looking brewery. We didn't actually dump the donuts into the beer. That was faked for a photo, but I think it was really engaging just seeing the, it was, but yeah, I think it was just seeing two things like beer and donuts that shouldn't make sense, but absolutely did make sense in terms of the brand audience. And it was just a bit of fun. And I think everything just, like the merch, it all followed the same theme. And then we did a bit of a PR send out where we sent actual donuts and beers to people. And I think that's just the type of thing that if that arrives to your front door, you're definitely going to post it and put it on social. So it did just seem to have a real moment of being everywhere for that week that we launched it.
But this is the thing, like, so you touched on it. Beyond, okay, it's a collaboration, and to most people, it's a bit of a different beer. With Who Cult, you did skateboard giveaways, you did limited edition merch, you did a launch party, you had content creator outreach. A lot of this stuff, I don't think breweries go, I don't see the value in just like a limited run in doing all that stuff. Why, in your mind, were you like, this is essential, we have to go all in on this?
I think just from a marketing point of view, I do put a lot of focus on just brand-led moments anyway. And I think, just it was a limited launch. It may be something we bring back in future if the people want it. But I think it was just one of those moments. Let's get people talking. Let's do something disruptive, because I think that is what you can't just be bringing out a new core beer every month. These limited launches that just get people talking and build the overall brand, I think is like really important. But it's also, I think you can't force it. I think sometimes a beer that you make will have a theme or a brand that fits really well. Like on this, it was so easy to do all of these things, to almost incorporate every part of like the marketing, every different kind of marketing, because it just had such a strong theme. Where sometimes a brand may lean better into, we can do a launch event because this makes sense, but then a PR send out is just kind of, using influencers just wouldn't really work. So it's just, doing what works for each individual beer you launch, I think it's just the way to do it.
So is it pretty black and white for you? You can go, right, we've got this beer, that makes sense to do the event, that makes sense to do the additional merch. Like there's some kind of clear separation between what works and what won't.
Yeah, I think so. I think if it makes sense, do it. If it feels like you're forcing it a little bit, I think that's when maybe question why you're doing it. Or in that case, if you've got a brand that doesn't really make sense when you're trying to think of all these different marketing ideas, then maybe you need to rethink the brand so that it does work a little bit better. Because like I say, with collaborations, they're great if they make sense. I see a lot of brands collaborating that just don't really make sense. And I think that's when it just seems a little forced then of, it's great that you've collaborated, but why? Like what was the reasoning behind it? And I think it's got to make sense
So when you say it makes sense, it's got to be brand aligned. Like you already give out that kind of vibe, that energy. It matches with the brand that you're doing. Like
100%.
Tiny Rebel aren't going to pair up with Stanley Stairlift, for example, or maybe you could.
Yeah.
It could be fun.
It'd be quite disruptive, but.
But dude, obviously you spent time with AU Vodka, and even just the ideas that you're bringing to Tiny Rebel are quite refreshing in a way. Previously, we've talked about like getting inspiration from fashion, entertainment, gaming, lifestyle brands. Like, how important is it for a brewery to look outside of the brewery space to get inspiration for marketing and ideas and activations?
I think super important. I think it's very easy to box yourself in and maybe just look at competitors or other people in your industry, but there are so many industries that you could take pointers from. If you really look at it, they may be launching a product that is nothing like yours, but how they're launching it and certain things they do, and I think is really important to just be aware of. Like, I think like some of my favorite brands at the moment are like electrolyte companies. I think like Pure Sport and Salt are doing crazy things in the marketing space right now, which like you wouldn't think would link with beer or other things. But clothing brands as well. I think a brand that does it really well, like Represent Clothing, if they're releasing like a new clothing line, the founders, who've got a pretty big social following themselves, will kind of wear it for a few weeks leading up. So they're almost teasing it in a way of like, it's getting eyes on it. People are in the comments saying, when's that t-shirt dropping? When's that hoodie dropping? And that's the type of thing that like you try and then relate to your industry. And it's really important, I think. But I think the brands who do it really well in whatever industry don't look at themselves as like, oh, we're a brewery, it's using social media to sell our beer. I think you've got to switch the mindset and be like, no, we're a social first brand that just so happen to sell beer and merchandise, and just kind of think of it that way. I think that is really important.
Getting into the mindset of like a lifestyle brand for more and more breweries, I can see being really advantageous. I've spoken to people before when like planning events, and it's a case of going, think of the most engaging event for the kind of people you want in the tap room, and then the beer is like a secondary thing almost.
I think you've just got to remember that I think the brands do it really well. They sell the feeling rather than selling the product. Like, people don't want to buy a backpack, they want to buy hiking with friends, and it's how you tell that story through your marketing. And they don't just want to buy a beer, they want to buy that first cold beer in Spain after you've been on the plane for 3 hours. It's that feeling of fair, rather than just you'll end up just being like that McDonald's CEO who referred to a burger as a product. If you think of your product as just selling the product, I think you have got to sell the feeling.
Yo, I just want to take a second out of Branding for Breweries to make you aware of something. For those of you who don't know, outside of hosting Branding for Breweries, writing the book Branding for Breweries, I also provide independent breweries with hands-on support with their branding, design, and marketing. In fact, it's even better than that, because it's not just me, it's a whole bunch of awesome independent brewery folks who are dedicated to doing the very best for each and every independent brewery. The team have worked with some incredible breweries like Northern Monk, Ossett, Brains, Pillars, all over the globe, and gaining results like doubling revenue, winning Rebrand of the Year, even gaining over 7 million views on the TikTok channel. So if you're looking to level up your brewery's branding and marketing this year, drop us a message over at www.thebrandweavercollective.com and a member of the team will get back to you and we can have a chat. Now, back to the show.
And I suppose this relates back to like knowing the vibe, and we talked about the collaborations and partnerships. When you look for inspiration outside of the brewery space, are you looking at brands that are similar in terms of your audience? So whilst it's not a brewery, but they would wear this, they would listen to that, they might eat that. And does that give you a good kind of gauge as to other ideas that you can then reflect on the brewery itself?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think breweries especially, like, it is kind of difficult because you have such a like wide audience in terms of like age, because you can go from, well, legally 18 but probably younger, all the way up to 70s, 80s, where if you try and market to an 18-year-old and an 80-year-old, then you end up marketing to no one, and you end up looking really lost as a brand. So I think you've just got to sit down and work out, right, we do have a wide audience in terms of age, but what things connect the 18 and the 80-year-old? And, if that's music, art, culture, pop culture references, and then, you lean into those things that you are ticking the box of both of those ages without, trying to just target one.
Mm-hmm. And so in terms of like order of priority in marketing, are you going, it's culture and community, which then leads to the promotion of the beer afterwards? You're not going, here's a beer first.
I'd say they are equally important. There's, you can't really have one without the other. You could create an amazing beer that tastes incredible, but if you're not marketing in a way that resonates with people, then it's not going to sell. But then you could also have the best marketing campaign ever, but if the beer tastes like ass, then it's not going to become a success. So, I think it is. It's definitely, I guess, it's how you sell. I think the culture and the community and how you build your brand and the messaging is what brings people in and builds your community, and that sells your first pint. And then I think the quality and the taste of the beer is what then sells that second and third pint and keeps them coming back. So equally as important. I don't think one takes the cake.
The 2-pint test, I like to call it. It makes
yeah.
So a lot of breweries, when they go, well, who do you want to drink your beer? They'll go, everyone. I want everyone to drink my beer. Would you argue, is that the right approach? Is that the right goal? Or is there a better way of targeting people?
I guess just what we touched on there of, it's very hard to pin down a single person in this industry, like I said, because it's so broad. I think, you do just have to just sit down. I think if you want your brand to stand the test of time, I think you've got to have a clear set of brand goals and brand values, and just sit down and what do you stand for? What areas do you want to focus on that I think it's even just like your team and inject your personality into it, and then people with the same interest will come. If you do try to market to everyone, that is kind of where you lose touch a little bit then, and you just look very lost as a brand, and it's tough. It is tough to get it right.
All right, so let's make this like super practical for those people listening then. If you had a brewery, no budget, no team, where do you begin to actually start to make an impact with your marketing?
Well, I think if you've started a brewery and you have no budget or team, it's going to be difficult. But if you've decided to start that brewery, you've clearly got a passion for beer. So I think, it's just sitting down and it's working out what do you want your brand to do? What do you want it to stand for? What are the goals? What are the values? And then if you've got a clear list of what you need to achieve and you need to get that message out there, you just have to brainstorm how you can get that message out there in the most creative way possible. And like, you don't need a huge budget. Like, you just need a social media account and a phone with a camera. And when it comes to designing, get a piece of paper and a pen out, but please don't use AI. That is, if one piece of advice you can take from this is, please don't use AI.
What about, is that the same approach for someone who's looking for local growth versus wider growth? Because I'm always concerned with the use of social media, where it's great for a wider reach, but are you going to be missing that kind of core local audience with it?
I would never not use it. I think social media is super important, but then if you are looking for more of I think a lot of brands maybe do forget about the community aspect of marketing, where it's all about online and growing and growing and growing, but then they're not really giving anyone the chance to get into their brand on like a personal level. Whereas I think if that is something that's important to you, then, you throw these events and you do run clubs or whatever you want to do to just get people, you invite people down to the brewery, you have an open door policy. I think that's, if local building is something you're passionate about, then that's something I would definitely look to incorporate. I know the guys here, Brad and Gaz, I'm in the Cardiff bar right now, which I know they used to just hold events here where home brewers would kind of come down and they would test the beers, and they would give them pointers on maybe things to change. And I think I met someone here a few weeks ago, and I was just speaking to them like while having a pint, and he's continued to drink Tiny Rebel and come to this bar for years because of that community thing. And this was probably before the time of social media. The fact that they opened the doors and they were like, you could put a face to a name, that has like really like resonated with someone, and it's it works.
And I suppose on the other end of the scale, like, it's not always guaranteed that the content you're going to make is going to resonate, it's going to get the reach that you want. When's that kind of like paid advertising and boosting posts really come into play?
Yeah, I guess it is hard to predict what's going to work, but like I said, with the speed of the brewing world, you kind of can test things. If you bring out a beer and you have a bit of a plan of how you're going to launch it and all these different aspects of marketing that you're going to do, and then for the second time around that you do it, I think you'll pick up things from that first launch. So that did really well. That did really well. We'll repeat that. That didn't work so well. Maybe we could do that better. But with paid advertising, I think that is just, if you've got a message and you're confident in it and that's where you want to get out there, paid advertising is just an extra tool to just get more eyes on the message that you're putting out there.
Just a bigger microphone to get it in front of more people these days.
Basically, yeah. I think if you're confident in the message, then put a bit of a spend behind it.
Would you be happy talking about like the newest release that you've been spearheading? Because, we talk about community, we talk about the breadth of the marketing activity. And I'm intentionally not saying the beer name because I know I would just say it horribly wrong, even though you put it on the back of the can. But like, could you talk to us about the concept, how you came up with it, and then what you've done to push that out there? Because I think that's a really, really interesting case study as to what other breweries need to be thinking about.
Yeah, so we are still kind of in the middle of the launch of, it's called Ymyrryd, which means still here in Welsh. Obviously, we are a Welsh brewery. And the thought behind the message is actually it's a song by a folk musician called David Iwan, who was really like a bit of a famous character in the Welsh language world, and kind of like used to protest back in the day and fight for the language, because, the language was almost trying to be killed off, and there's a lot of politics to it, which I won't get into, but I think we loved it because it's become now synonymous with a bit of a football song. Ymyrryd is a lot of people resonate with it, but it kind of has a double meaning for us as well, because we are an independent craft brewery going up against the likes of, your Heinekens and your Coles and everything. It is tough to fight with these big boys. So that's where we wanted to almost nod to, we are still here, we're still fighting. But yeah, I do have a can here actually of the Welsh lager. But for the launch, we have, again, it's one of those things that I'd like to see young people drinking after the football, but then also the old men down the rugby club drinking it. It's a bit of a, an easy drinking, tick a lot of boxes type of drink. So with the marketing, we have kind of gone a bit all in on it. So we did something really disruptive where we hiked up to one of the most iconic mountains in Wales with an ex-rugby player who DJ'd at the top, and that got a lot of like local press. So that was kind of ticking the box of disruptive, young people, bit of sports with rugby. And then we actually worked with David Iwan, who is who wrote the song Ymyrryd, who is from more like North Wales, and like I said, his song has become really synonymous with the football. So that's then ticked the box of like the football, the older generation, the North and the South. And then also myself and Rowan, our videographer, have just kind of done a bit of a north to south road trip of just taking content and all these different like landmarks and everything. So it's just, I think if you're a Welsh person, you're going to resonate with it. And that was kind of the goal with it, really, was something that's really for just Welsh people, not to alienate the English in any way, but it's almost like a bit of a Yorkie, not for girls type scenario where it's you can drink it, but it's up to you.
Not made for you though. But even like the can design, I'd almost call them Easter eggs that you've worked into the type design. The dragon scales, the heart strings, daffodils are in there. At what point were you brainstorming like, oh, we're just going to try and cram as many bits of symbolism into the can as possible?
Full credit to Ray, our designer. She is incredible. She came up with the full logo design, and then all of the on the can there's actually a load of illustrations of iconic Welsh landmarks, which it's almost a fun game that if you've got the can, you can try and guess them all. But I think when we were looking at it, it's, as a craft brewery, so much goes into actually creating the liquid. Like I said, the brewing team are absolute wizards. And I think the can should reflect that. I think if you put in so much effort into making a beer that is just tastes great, has had a lot of thought put into it, why then just do a can that's half-assed? I think like the container that the can comes in also needs to have that same amount of like effort and design consideration and just thought behind it. And it's a brand we're really confident in. It's something that we're hoping is going to be a new core product for us, stands the test of time rather than a bit of more of a fun come and go type launch.
Love it, man. And I suppose it's another conversation point, isn't it? When people are looking at the can, I do it all the time. It's my job, right? To deconstruct the can, like, oh, that's nice, that's interesting. It's just another thing that carries on the interest in the product. All right. So Scott, let's look at pitfalls. What do you see breweries doing where you're like, don't do that, stop that with your marketing?
I guess what we've touched on a few times in this chat, it is just if you're gonna launch a beer and it's a liquid that you're really confident in, give it the same amount of like love and attention when you're gonna launch it, and give it the best chance of success you can, and give it that full launch platform. Like I said, there are so many breweries that I know that I see on social media for the first time, and that's it. That's their launch strategy. Is like, we've made a new beer, here it is, go buy it. And it's just kind of, it must be quite deflating for that brewery, because they probably had they've all sat in a room, they've tasted it, they know it's great, they've put a lot of love into it. And well, why are people not caring? Why do people not care about our new launch? But it's, I think that's what marketing is. You need to make people care about your product, and that's what I would say is just stop jumping the gun and just launching your beer. Sit down and put as much time into the marketing strategy as you would into making the beer.
Beautiful. So Scott, as we bring this to a close, mate, where can people find out more about you? We've got people on Instagram asking if they can get hold of Tiny Rebel in the States. So where can they find Tiny Rebel? Where can they find you for more conversations and just to keep up to date with what's going on?
So not available in the States yet. Hopefully that is something that we can change at some point. But yeah, tinyrebel.co.uk for all of our beer launches. And then we are at Tiny Rebel Brew Co. on Instagram and TikTok. So social channels is the best way to kind of keep up to date with what we're doing.
Fantastic, mate. Well, Scott, my man, thank you so much for your time today, dude. I think it's been a wonderful masterclass and things to consider when you're going to launch a beer. Hopefully a load of people are going to take a lot from it. everyone who's tuned in, thank you so much for leaving a comment, for getting involved, and everyone listening in the future. This is Tim from the past, thanking you as always for being awesome and listening to Branding for Breweries. Stay tuned for other amazing guests just like Scott coming up soon. Cheers, Scott. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's a wrap on this week's episode of Branding for Breweries. If you got something great from it, hit follow, like, and subscribe on your favorite streaming app. Or even better, leave a review, share it with your brewery pals, or get in touch, because I want to chat to you. Rock on!